Hello, so I'm Christina Connor, and I'm going to be talking about formatting line graphs. It's pretty simple as far as just the basics of a line graph, but I've noticed that with the grad students that I teach, that maneuvering through Microsoft Excel or even Google Sheets, just looking at like standardizing the graph and formatting the lines and all of that stuff can be a little tricky. So I kind of wanted to walk y'all through that. One article that I love sharing is the Kubina et al. Typically, Dr. Kubina talks about acceleration graphs, but this one is specific towards line graphs and just standardizing them to making sure that we're making clinical decisions appropriately based on graphs that are not skewed to where they're like stretched out or like squished too thin or anything like that. So he talks about making sure that we're formatting them correctly. So two parts. There's essential features. There's a really nice chart laid out in that article. And the first part is just understanding like there's a vertical and a horizontal axis. So you got your X and your Y. And so understanding that within your x-axis, the horizontal, that this is typically your time series, your calendar days or whatever. He talks about how important it is to have like a continuous time series versus sessions. That's why I have an asterisk right there. So an example would be like, let's say I had a session on Monday and Wednesday, 2 days apart, right? But then I had supposed to have a session on Friday. However, maybe there was a cancellation, maybe there was a holiday, whatever it was, but there's a gap. And so if you look on a graph, you'll see 1, 2, and 3 equal intervals apart, but in time, they're not equal intervals. The first 2 days, the first 2 sessions are 2 days apart, and then the third session may be like a week later or whatnot. And then just to know, like with behavior, time can affect behavior as well. And so you might not see that within a graph. If you are going from session 2 to session 3, you're like, okay, what happened here? We saw a drop in behavior or whatever, behavior change in some way, but we didn't change anything. Well, it could just be the time lapse in between. Then, we had 2 days here and then we had like a week later. So taking that into consideration when we're looking and reading these graphs. And then with your y-axis, you got your behavior. Whatever it is that you're measuring, you have counts, duration, whatever it might be. And then after the essential features, talks about these quality features, okay? I'm not gonna get into all of them. I just kind of wanna get into just kind of formatting them. And then I think like phase changes, like the conditional change lines are really great, but just another conversation to have maybe outside of this video. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the vertical length that has a 2:3 ratio to the horizontal axis. So this is going to be like the graph size. You have like a rectangle, right? But making sure that it's not stretched too wide or kind of squished and it's like too tall, because then that really skews like what your line is going to look like and how you can make those clinical decisions. And I'll explain in another slide of what that would look like and how to do that. The other things that are part of the quality features is making sure that your tick marks are outward. Sometimes you can generate a graph and it'll be like just crossing the line, or maybe it's even inside the graph, so you can change that up. Making sure that your ticks are evenly spaced, which it typically is on like a computer generated graph. And then making sure that you label them so that we know what it is. When you look at a graph, you want to be able to read it without like reading like the body of your paragraph or whatnot. We want to be able to look at it and understand what the graph is trying to tell us. And then making sure that the data points and lines, like the paths, are visible. So there are times when you just hit that graph button, you generate a graph and it's just a line. There's no data markers. I'll show you how to do that. There's also times when you generate a graph and you have a line and the data markers are just so tiny they blend into the line. So being able to change like the thickness of the lines, but also change like the thickness of the markers. And you can change the markers from being like a circle to a triangle and a square or whatever it is. Typically, it's best to have your graphs in black, not in green. So I'll show you how to change the colors too, because I love to have like blues and yellows and oranges to distinguish between the different data series in there. But in our field, we really like those black graphs with the black lines, clean lines, but then using like different shapes as our data markers. Now, before we get into like the demo part of this, I want to talk about those ratios. So within the graphic that I'm gonna give you, it's just a PNG like image template, but it shows where the 3 to 4. So this is the 3 inches and 4 inches, and then this is the 5 inches versus 8 inches. Now we don't want it to be fixed in inches. I just generated the graphic that way. When you have a ratio, you just have like this shape, and you can make the shape bigger and smaller, but keep the same ratio of the 2 to 3, 3 to 4, or whatnot, okay? Now, how to use that graphic. Okay, I have this video right here, and making sure that you overlay your image of the stay green over your graph. And so it's see-through, so you're able to see your graph underneath it. But making sure that bottom left corner is aligned where the X and Y axis meet. And then looking at the end of your axis right here. So I did like a highlighted yellow marker there. And you want to make sure that these two areas stay inside the green area. And in the video, you're going to see me pulling at the corner. When you pull at the corner of the graphic, you're not stretching the graphic, and making sure that you test it out too. A trick to keep your image from not like stretching too wide or too tall or anything like that is to hold the shift key while you're doing it. But I found that if I just toggled the corner without the shift, at least for this demonstration, it worked. But to be safe, I would say use the shift key on your keyboard. So anyways, you'll see me stretching it back and forth, but you can see that I can have both the X and the Y within the green area. Okay, now I'm going to show a non-example with a graph that is stretched out too wide. And I can't achieve both ends of the y-axis and the x-axis in the green area. I try to, but I can't. And so being able to bring that graph back to within that green area will be beneficial to you, and I'll show you how to do that when we do our demonstration. So kind of look at the ends there, and then I have the top part in green, or not. So now it's within the white area, so it's not in green anymore. But then when I try to get the y-axis in green, my x-axis is not working out at all. So here's another example of like a squished tall graph. The top part is in green, but the bottom isn't. And then I try to get the bottom, the x-axis in green, but then I can't get my top y-axis in green. So kind of a cool way to kind of measure your graphs just with an image overlay. All right, so now we're gonna work on the actual demonstration part. And so I'm gonna put up Microsoft Excel and share my screen. All right, so here's kind of where we're gonna try, what we're trying to achieve. I'm gonna go to the second, and what I would want you to do first is to highlight the data. So I do have behavior 1 and behavior 2, and that first graph that you saw only had 1. And so at the end, I want you to see what it would look like to add another data series. So when you highlight the area like this, you're gonna go to Insert. There's an Insert tab at the top, and there's a bunch of graphs. Choose the one that's a line graph. This one's a scatter, and it says 2D line, and I want the one with markers, okay? Now you get something like this. It's very similar to what we saw earlier, but it's missing some of those quality features that we had talked about, so we're not done yet. Now I've got our check boxes down here, so let's work at the tick marks first. So I'm going to highlight or just click in the area of the box down here. I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can just start editing. I'm going to format the axis. And then we're going to go to on tick marks. So if you look at it, before I did that, it was between the tick marks and I want them on the tick marks. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I want the tick marks on the outside, which is already there, so that looks good. You'll actually notice, well, that the data starts on the y-axis right here. So we're gonna change that up in just a second. But let me go ahead and format the y-axis. So I am going to click there, and let's see, we're gonna do outside. So we get those tick marks on the outside. Let's see what we got here. Now notice that this is a black line and this is gray. We can change the colors of those lines. So let's go ahead and change that to black. I'm gonna go to line and see how it's gray there. I'm gonna go ahead and use the black, and now we got the black. Now, since the data points start on the y-axis, I want to shift that over. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add, insert a row, right clicking, pressing insert, and then voila, we have that there, but we still have this chart that looks like this. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to click on the area and click on the actual like data series, and then move these boxes up. Now we get something funny right here with those numbers. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do an apostrophe. When I do an apostrophe there, it just kind of eliminates any like number formulas or anything like that. It's been it's a way to get outside of a formula or any like automatic stuff in the cell. So I put that there, and it just still shows up as a blank cell, and it shifted everything over to the right. So that's kind of a little bit of a hack on my part. Let's see, I don't like them in a horizontal format, so I'm going to go to text options, I believe, and click on like this box right here. It's at horizontal. I can change it to 90 degrees. And I kind of want it the other way around, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate it that way. And let's see, we've got our tick marks outwards. They're always going to be evenly spaced. And then we are missing labels. So to get to labels, you're going to click on the chart, go to chart design. There's a tab up here at the top, and click on add chart element. So with that, we can add different labels, different things to the chart of what you want. So I'm going to do this as dates, and I'm also going to add vertical, which is your y axis, and what was this, counts. Let's just do counts here, something pretty generic and basic. Another thing that Dr. Kubina talks about is having like a white space behind the line. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that out by clicking delete. And so it just takes that out. So we've got a nice graph right here. I've added labels, clearly visible. So this is how you can actually change like the color and the sizing of the lines and the markers. So let's go ahead and start with black. And then the markers, so there's two like tabs that you can toggle here. Let's go to the marker. I'm gonna go to border, which is just the outline, do black, but if you take a look at it, the fill is still blue. So we're gonna go to the fill and go to, whoops, I need to click the actual data series. Marker, fill, and the fill needs to be black. Okay. And there you go. So another thing that I like to do is to do the width of the line. Sometimes it's like too thick for my preference, or maybe it blends in with the marker or whatnot. So I want to, you know, make that stand out a little bit more. So you can change the width, the thickness of the line here. You can even change it to like different kinds of graph, like line. You could do like a dashed line graph or whatnot. It doesn't have to be a solid line. And then with the markers, I'll show you in a bit whenever we get to behavior 2. Now, the last thing, so we got our data paths that are visible, we got our data points that are visible, is to make sure that we get that, that ratio. I'm going to insert that graphic that I showed you earlier. Now, since I have everything kind of organized on the left-hand side and there's kind of not a lot of like white space to work in, I'm gonna go ahead and move my graph here. Notice that this graphic is big. If you toggle that corner, like I said, you'll keep the integrity of the ratio. Pressing shift does a wonderful job of doing that too. If you use this, you'll lose the integrity. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo that. Now, when I put this graphic in that corner of the Y and X axis, I'm actually within the white space and I'm not staying green. So I'm actually not within the ratio. So maybe if I stretch this up a little bit, I'm both within the green area on the Y and the X. Now, just kind of aesthetic wise, I noticed that the graph is kind of leaning to the right a little bit. So what I can do is kind of click in the inside area and see if I can shift it to the left a little bit. And I think that looks good. As far as, I think we're done here. So let me go ahead and click that over there. But I do want to tell you what it looks like to add another data series. So if you click your chart, it'll highlight the area on your spreadsheet. So if you get that square on the right side, you click it and you drag it over, you can add another behavior series. It did turn orange and in my chart title disappeared. So let me see if I can format that. I'll go to chart design, get that title back. So chart title at the top, I'm gonna call it behaviors 1 and 2. Whoops. Something simple. And then I'm gonna change this to black, but using a different marker. Do that. Marker, I want that to be black. However, the border I want to be black too. You want to go to marker options, and so that's when you can change it from not a circle, because then you can't distinguish behavior 1 and behavior 2, but maybe do like a triangle or a square or whatnot. So let's see if that changed it to triangles, and it did. Now those triangles look pretty small, and kind of blending in with that line. So let me reduce the line any if that makes a difference, and it does. But maybe I want those triangles to be a little bigger. So if you go to marker options and you click the size to be a little bigger, let's see what that looks like, and that looks pretty good. So I think that's that graph looks pretty good for behaviors 1 and 2 and just hitting those basics of quality features. All right, so let's switch over to Google Sheets. It's really similar, but you could see differences. They share a lot of functionality, but when it comes to like formatting and doing some specific things that you want to do with maybe the lines and the charts and all of that, it does have some limitations behind it, but for the most part, it does what you want. The aesthetics look a little different, but that's okay too. I love the how the availability of Google Sheets, how anyone can have it if you don't have like Microsoft Office. And so I think it's a really good alternative. So we're trying to mimic something like this, and we'll just do this all over again. I'm going to take this gap away to see what we're going to do. Now let's highlight again, and then you'll click insert, go to chart, and you get this automatic graph. There's no options. You can do different types of charts if you wanted to here under setup. So everything kind of works in this right hand navigation, but we want it on a line chart, so that one is good to go. Let's change the chart title. We called it like behavior 1 last time because that was kind of defaulted, but let's center that. It does do a left default, so we can center align it. And then let's just go through these check marks again. So let's look at the tick marks, what we can do there. To get the editing screen, you just right click the chart, and I'm going to go to grid lines and ticks, but you really can access any of this stuff from clicking any one of these. So I'm going to do horizontal. So like I said, when you right click, you get all of these options, but we can directly get to grid lines and ticks. We're on the horizontal. Now, I don't want these lines here, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck those, but I do want the major tick marks. It's crossing at the axis, so I'm going to go and click on the outside, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the vertical axis. So there's a drop down, so you can toggle between X and Y, vertical versus horizontal. Unclick that grid line there to have a clean graph, and then you'll have the major ticks, and then having that go on the outside of the axis, which is looking good so far. Now, if you look at the data down here, you're looking at every other date. So what I tend to do is just do aggregate so we can see everything. I'm going to go back to formatting. I do want it, I mean, the slant looks good, like I said, but I think just my preference, I like it this way. And then we need to format the line. So we do want that to be a black. It's on auto. So I'm going to put it on, let me show you what one looks like. So it's highlighted, and we did do black, but it looks blue. If you check it off, because it's just highlighting what you're selecting, you can, if you check off of it, you can see what's going on. I think it's a little too skinny, so I'm just going to go to 2-point, and then it's at circle right now. Like if you hover over, you see those data points. We need those there, but the point set is 0. So let's see, we do it at 2. It's really tiny, kind of blends in with that line. So let's see if we could put it at 5, and that looks pretty good. I like that there. Let's see if I can change the titles for the X. Then we can do counts like we did on the other graph that we generated. And I think that's looking pretty good. So let's see, we got tick marks that are evenly spaced. We changed the labels, and we made sure the data points were clear with the lines and the markers. So let's see if we can pull in behavior 2. In Excel, we were, they would highlight the data on the spreadsheet. However, it's not doing that for us here. So let's right click, get to the editor, and let's go to setup. Now we have the x-axis, and it's telling us what cells they're in. So we're in A3 down to A17, and it's doing behavior 1. I like to get to behavior 2. So let's add a series. There it goes. And then I'm going to highlight. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Click and drag. C3 to C17. And that looks good, except we need to format the line. So let's click on the line, go to black. We liked it at 2. And I say I, because I'm talking to myself here. And then it's at like a 10. What? But it's not as big as I thought it would be. But 7 does look kind of small. So yeah, let's go back to 10. And that's interesting, and that's okay, because I'm guessing it's just different shapes, so it looks a little different. And so we got a pretty okay looking graph. I think you can get a lot of like formatting capabilities with Excel, but this works too. So I wanted to make sure, lastly, that we have our ratios in order. So what you would do is you do insert image, and instead of in the cells, you're going to do it over the cells. You're going to drag that file over. Let me get back to it. So let's drag that over. So we've got the same overlay, and let's put it there to see we're in green. So we are not. If you look at the chart here, at the edge of the X, we're in green, and at the edge of the Y, we are not. So let's see if I can make this a little taller. And try that out. And that looks a little bit better there. Now I would like to resize the chart and kind of move it a little bit, but I'm having a hard time with the formatting a little bit. So I think I can like size it this way, and there we go. Kind of shift it a little bit, and then now it's like cutting off the dates. I bet if I made that one smaller, it would be okay, but I don't know if that like reduces the readability. So maybe just making that a smidge taller. Whoa. Yeah, making it a lot taller. Just kind of working on the sizing area that way. And let's take a look at this graphic now. So yeah, we are well within the green, which is looking good. And I believe if I wanted to, I might just for looks, I may want to put this as a slant so I can like maybe make it less boxier, but I think this looks pretty good for generating something in Google Sheets. All right, so I hope you enjoyed these 6 tips, really. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this like basic tutorial on how to just maneuver and format your graphs through Microsoft Office, well, Microsoft Excel, and then Google Sheets. Sometimes it could just be really hard, and then they update things. So maybe this video will be outdated in just a few years, so maybe I'll do another one. Alrighty.